No one knows your business better than you. So who better to create your website than, well, you? Wix's website builder puts it all in your hands. Create a beautiful website just by talking with AI, or choosing from thousands of templates. Customize every detail with simple drag and drop tools and get everything you need to start running business your way. Build more, think bigger, and do it all yourself on Wix.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like aloe or skins, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. With Shop Pay, that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts are going abandoned and way more sales happening. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whatever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Skins uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
Chris,
Mark,
you've seen the news, right, recently about
can you miss it?
about how these bands have taken their music off Spotify and other streaming services. You've heard about this. You've heard of
That
this.
news.
Yeah.
I thought you meant all the other news.
All the other news.
Yeah, that news.
That news.
I have. The Techsodus.
Techsodus.
Have you ever had an idea that you think to yourself, I am a freaking genius.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant
Yeah.
way. I came up with that last night, Techsodus, and then I realised that probably 1,000 people had come up with it.
Is that like a Philip K. Dick book or something?
But yeah, the Techsodus, yeah, well, it's maybe not quite in the scale of an Exodus yet, is it? But in terms of music, but yeah, I did begin to wonder why so many artists were leaving big streaming recently. We've had Deerhoof, we've had Juju, Godspeed You, Black Emperor, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. And I believe there was some shoegaze band called Hotline TNT, as well.
Well, yeah, I guess they're really doing this for two reasons, right? So they're kind of protesting against the way these services, these platforms pay artists. And they're also protesting against Daniel Ek's personal involvement in arms companies.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that brought it to the more recent attention, right? Because the other one's sort of old news.
Yeah. But is that a good idea? What does it change? And should all artists do this? I think we should probably talk about it, shouldn't we?
Okay, well, welcome to Unsung, shining our funky light on all the lesser reported stories of music. I mean, yes, this has been reported quite a bit recently, but we're going to try and take a bit of a deeper look at it and maybe come out with some opinions that are not there in the mainstream.
Yes.
Hopefully you go with us on that. How do we get here, Mark?
So before we actually talk about why these platforms have these issues, specifically Spotify, one platform, we kind of need to talk about some of the fundamentals. So how do we get here and how did things get this bad, right? So we did an episode a few years ago on Playola, which is streaming manipulation.
Yep.
Some of the information about it covers in that in much more detail. So we're just going to sort of skim through some of the key
Yeah, we've also
facts.
got an older episode called Slave to the Algorithm where we had a genuine PhD on the show with us talking about Spotify and how these things came about. So we'll fly through this bit.
But it all starts in 1999, really. That's Napster. if you're of a certain age like us, then you'll remember that Napster was a peer-to-peer app that allowed people to share and download MP3s. And, you know, it was pretty big deal at the time. It was really very heavy illegal, let's call it. Let's use the Scottish term. It was heavy illegal, right? And in 2001, the major label companies were successful in shutting it down completely, probably at the behest of Lars Ulrich, who turns out he was right, which is just so hard to say.
Well, I think he was right. He had a point.
Yeah. But by the time it was shut down, it had 80 million registered users. Now, that's not as many as Spotify have now.
No, but it's still a lot of people, yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of darkly funny that it took something as illegal as Napster, as blatantly illegal as Napster, to sort of shift the Overton window so far that we end up in a situation where Spotify is normalised, you know.
Yeah, totally. You know, when it was taken offline, it didn't end piracy. Piracy just didn't just stop. It actually got worse. The toothpaste was well and truly out of that tube. Loads of other apps took its place. You may remember LimeWire. You may remember Kazaa. You may remember SoulSeek, which is still going. You can still use that.
Thank goodness.
This is a little flashback, just a little insight. When I was trying to get my hands on we did an episode a few months ago on Ink and Dagger, right?
Yes.
And when I was trying to get my hands on the records, I used SoulSeek because they're not anywhere, right?
Yeah, but
I tried to.
But they did that themselves, didn't they?
Yeah, but I tried to, but I couldn't download it because I hadn't uploaded anything. So I tried to download them and then I just get banned basically immediately by the people that was...
Right. I'm pretty sure one of the members of Ink and Dagger used that though to distribute a bunch of
I can believe one of them actually got in contact with us, and you know, we need to get him on the show at some point. It sounds like it'd be a really interesting chat.
I think just a wee bit of a tangent here. I think the labels were really slow to act on the digital revolution. They were pretty behind the curve. I'd imagine they were all too busy doing like rails of coke and combing their ponytails and their soft tops to actually move with the times, and so they got caught napping by things like Napster.
And in that Playola, in that Playola episode that I spoke about, we go into a lot of detail as to how this all happened, right? So I'm not going to go into exhaustive detail there, but go and listen to it after this, of course. Broadly speaking, the music industry went into freefall. Revenue-wise, it just collapsed entirely. Yeah, almost entirely.
On a lot of our show, like that's a really crucial part, like whether an album came before or after that sort of 2003 collapse, because that's when the arse fell out of the industry, as we'd say.
Yeah, between 1999 and 2003, revenue dropped by about 15%.
Yeah, and people were getting fired right, left and centre as well.
That's billions of dollars. But then something happened. Apple launched the iPod. I think I still have an iPod somewhere. And the iTunes store. The iPod itself is a genuinely useful device. It was a bit of tech that looked cool.
Objectively clever design.
Yep, was very easy to use. And the iTunes store was pretty decent as well, in the sense that within a couple of years, every single major record label and indie record label was selling their music on that. And that was something major labels had been struggling to figure out for themselves, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was 99 cents, or it was 70 cents and 99 cents a track, you know, and that period with Apple and iTunes and iPods and stuff was an interesting stopgap.
Definitely, and you know, and the model that they kind of used, which was Steve Jobs getting all the major record labels to come on board with this project, is actually something that in the fullness of time Spotify would use as well. And we'll get to that in a second. But iTunes never really wins the day. It is the most popular online record store of its era, but it never really wins the day because, like you said, songs are like 99p, 99 cents or whatever. But see, if your iPod can hold 10,000 songs, no one's spending £10,000 on music. But they're still filling their iPods, so how are they doing that? Well,
other than Elton John.
Yeah. He probably has 10,000 songs. But they were filming it through piracy, right? That's the only way they were doing it. And this whole period, pretty much the entirety of the 2000s, nobody had a good idea on how to fix this problem. One guy started to have an idea in the mid-2000s, a guy called Daniel Ek, who is the CEO of Spotify.
I want a 2-letter last name.
Yeah, how cool would that be?
It's just weird to think that any of them are real.
He used to be a CTO of a mobile games company, and he had this idea to create an app which was essentially like iTunes but was using a subscription model. And in 2006 he created the company called Spotify, and he kind of built a team that would go about basically fulfill his vision. Ironically, and we spoke about this in our episode that I referenced earlier on, Spotify, the initial early version of Spotify was built on illegal content downloaded from the Pirate Bay. Yeah,
they populated it with downloaded pirated stuff. Funnily enough, Pirate Bay, also another Swedish export.
Yeah, that kind of at a loggerheads there. But I think that tells you kind of two things, right? One, it kind of tells you a little bit about what they really think about artists.
Or the inherent value of music.
And also tells you about the desire to kind of try and change the world using, basically change the model, shall we say, of how music is consumed.
Move fast and break stuff.
Pretty much, yeah. 3 years later, 2009, Spotify launched in the UK, and then after a lot of legal battles with record labels, which we also detailed in that episode, and around 2011, they launched in America as well. And the creation of Spotify, along with some of the really big P2P sites like the Pirate Bay, them going down, caused a huge drop in piracy.
You mentioned the legal battles, and it definitely hasn't always been plain sailing for Spotify on its way to the top. Lots of bands and artists didn't initially want to work with Spotify, but there was definitely a tipping point, a kind of widespread acquiescence, resistance is futile moment. Spotify was dominant, and the rest of us have to basically shit or get off the pot, swallow Spotify's lousy terms, or face being absent from the biggest party in town.
Yeah, and the terms are lousy. It's been all over the news for years that the terms are lousy.
It's no secret.
It's no secret, right? But they are, and will remain, probably for the foreseeable future, the biggest player in town, right? Just to kind of illustrate that, 89% of music revenue now comes from streaming services. Music revenues grew by 10% in 2023, and so did the whole industry.
Yeah, I think it also grew by 10%, didn't it?
Revenue from music streaming has grown year over year since the mid-2000s. And between 2005 and 2020, streaming revenue increased 34 times. So at its absolute nadir in 2005, the music industry was worth $0.1 billion.
Streaming.
Yeah. And it is now worth $19 billion. So, yeah, that's a pretty big turnaround in fortune, so we say. So, meanwhile...
Just a bit.
Meanwhile, they're not really paying artists very well. I mean, they're paying some artists well, but most artists, the vast majority of them aren't getting paid well.
Yeah, so, I mean, streaming companies try to keep the specifics of how much they pay for each stream for different artists under wraps, partly because they pay different artists quite significantly different rates. There was a big kind of scandal about how much the Beatles were able to negotiate per stream versus your average band, and everybody kind of pointing out, well, yeah, they're getting paid more, but they need it less.
Yeah.
There was a big industry blog called Trickier in 2020 that did a survey, and that's given us, I think, one of the best ideas to date, one of the kind of closest pictures of the payments. According to that report, Spotify pays 0.00348 cents. This is back in 2020 per stream. Right? Apple Music pays 0.00675, a good bit more. Amazon pays 0.00426, mid-table. Google pays 0.00554. That's maybe like kind of Heart of Midlothian. You know, upper table, not compete. Maybe hoping for a place in Europe. And Tidal pays 0.00876. So that's pretty good by these standards. As it happens, Peloton, which has its own deal with this because so many people have Pelotons and the music is dealt with separately through that company, they were top of the list, paying a massive 0.03107 cents a stream, which is like considerably higher than those other ones, albeit they've got a much smaller audience.
There is a newer platform called QBoss, which is kicking about. I don't know if you've seen it. They haven't disclosed how much they pay, but it is rumoured to be significantly more than these like factors of 10 times more. But I mean, a factor of less than a penny is, I think
sometimes those numbers are sort of meaningless as well, but I do remember, it sticks in my head, at one point you needed 16.8 million plays a month for a 4-piece band to make minimum wage in the UK. So 16.8 million streams per month.
That's what Deftones have. That's weird. So if we zoom out, right, in 2024, Spotify made 15.7 billion euros. That's an 18.3% increase in revenue. It posted its first ever net income of $1.1 billion. In 2023, actually lost 500 million euros, right? It posted its first ever net income of 1.3 billion last year.
Since it was founded.
That's the first full year that it has ever made money since, like you said, 2006.
This is wild.
That's a lot of money, but I rather suspect the amount of money you'd need to actually pay artists fairly on these platforms would eclipse that figure by quite a huge margin. I mean, if Spotify's only just been able to make itself profitable after 18 years in the red, there's actually really very little chance that they'll ever be able to pay artists fairly.
Yeah, the dreadful royalties thing has always been an issue for them in terms of perception. There have also been other bumps in the road for Spotify. Garth Brooks, Tom York, Taylor Swift, Prince Alarm. They all had some catalogue pulled off streaming for a variety of reasons at various points.
What will grow crooked you can't make straight. It's the price that you gotta pay. Do yourself a favor and pack your bags.
And for example, very few, if any, I don't know of any, but there may be some exceptions, Drag City releases appear on Spotify. So that means Joanna Newsom, Jim O'Rourke, things like that.
Farewell to loves that I have known. Even my deepest waters run. Tell me what is meant by sin or not.
You probably notice that these artists also need their labels and or their publisher's management to agree to this, otherwise they could get sued for breach of contract or loss of earnings. Neil Young, he very publicly boycotted Spotify in 2022.
Did I see you down in a young girl's town with your mother in so much pain? I was almost there at the top of the stairs with her screaming in the rain.
Specifically thanks to Joe Rogan's vaccine disinformation bollocks that he was...
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah. Rogan was obviously a Spotify superstar. And
Insane.
his
That's insane. That's insane.
exclusivity deal, which is now expired, by the way, he's no longer just on Spotify, but his exclusivity deal was major news, like headline news.
Was it $200 million or something like that I got for it?
Plus 220, something like that, yeah. Spotify at the time, though, still got 95% of its revenue from music, so they were paying Joe Rogan that, and podcasts in general only represented 5%, which is mad. That's changed a bit now. Neil Young said in January 2022 that Spotify represented 60% of his streaming revenue globally, and so his boycott amounted to, in his words, a huge loss for his record company to absorb. But
It's weird that he said record company and not himself.
Well, there you go. But that he'd removed his music because he, quote, could not continue to support Spotify's life-threatening misinformation to the music-loving public. That's in relation to Joe Rogan. But old Shaky came crawling back in 2024. The quote goes, other music services, including Apple, Amazon, Qobuz, Tidal, have started serving the same disinformation podcast I have opposed at Spotify. This is Joe Rogan, amongst others. Because I cannot leave all those services like I did Spotify because my music would have no streaming outlet to music lovers at all. I have returned.
So in terms of those folks that you mentioned return to the service, it's unlikely to be a coincidence that this acquiescence happened in tandem with a closer relationship between Spotify and the record labels that they once viewed as their destroyer. Some of the biggest labels over the years have found a lot of ways to make a lot of money from streaming. Spotify paid out $10 billion on royalties last year, although I think a lot of artists would kind of point out that only a small fraction of that money actually reaches them after a label takes its share.
I mean, yeah, a pittance. I mean, it is, sometimes it does just hit you. What an insane situation this is. Like,
the numbers themselves are fucking unfathomable, right?
Thinking about those fractions of pennies and just the fact that before it even gets to the artists, from those fractions of pennies, they're further subdivided infinitesimally. Like, how did this become normal? Like, what the fuck do you even call that system?
Well, I'm winding up. Let's stretch out a little bit. You could call it technofeudalism. And many people do.
Okay, we're going there.
Yeah, so, I've been winding up for this for about a year.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like aloe or skins, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. With Shop Pay, that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts are going abandoned and way more sales happen happening. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whatever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Skins uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Got an idea for an app? With Base 44, you don't need to know a single line of code. Just describe what you want, and Base 44 instantly designs the interface, builds the database, and connects the logic for you. Whether it's tracking invoices, planning meals, or managing a whole team, you can build at the speed of thought and customize it as you go. Stop waiting on developers. Start running your business smarter with Base 44. Visit base44.com and turn your idea into a live app today.
But briefly, we'll go into this. So, yeah. Technofeudalism. So I do feel that if you're taking a moral position against Spotify for not paying their artists properly, you also need to look at how the whole quote-unquote creator economy works. Mm-hmm. And here, my friends, is when we actually get to see the disease that is the creator economy and all of its glory in the form of what some people are calling technofeudalism or platform capitalism. You know, there's various names for it.
Technofeudalism, was that Varoufakis that coined it?
Varoufakis, yes, I think he actually coined it, yeah. He'll get a mention later on. But the whole idea of platform capitalism has been floating about for quite a while. Mm-hmm. For me and for many others, the problem is that tech platforms are like medieval fiefdoms controlled by the equivalent of feudal lords.
Yeah, so that's the system that predated capitalism, like feudalism, that sort of thing, where you were on a laird's land and you worked the land just to justify being there. Yeah. And they basically had complete control over the rules. They could arbitrarily do shit to you, kick you off your land. It's a big part of the Highland clearances, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, much like back then, your labour was exploited by the medieval overlords. So these platforms exist to extract the free labour from its users, and that is us. Right now, that is literally us.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing that people don't realise. They don't recognise it because it's a completely different setting. It's not people, doing a guy's farm to justify being allowed to continue to live on his land. It is something so different. It's like, no, I'm on these platforms out of choice.
Are you?
There's an element of choice there. Yeah.
I can't talk to my friends. I can't read the news. I can't, and we'll talk about that in a wee second.
Yeah.
In his book, The Internet Con, How to Seize the Means of Computation, Cory Doctorow,
Doctorow, D-O-C-T-O-R-O-W, for anyone listening.
Who also calls Mark Zuckerberg in that book a feudal warlord of middling intellect, which I love. He's actually also responsible.
Sick burn.
He's also responsible for the abolish Mark Zuckerberg, because he thinks that nobody should have as much power as he does. Yeah. And he does have quite a lot of power, but he thinks he should be abolished because nobody should ever have that much power or be in that position. But what he kind of says,
you abolish a person
exactly
in the same way we abolished Mussolini.
It's kind of ridiculous, but I think that's kind of the point, right? So, in his book, he says that these platforms are walled gardens or cities where users can't leave without also abandoning many of their existing friendships, communities, history, and memories.
Yeah, it's sort of held hostage a wee bit, aren't you?
Yeah. So once you're inside, you're kind of subject to these arbitrary rules, right? Like you said, like peasants tied to land. And I guess a lot of folk will know that having an arbitrary takedown of your content on a social media platform can actually be really frustrating and kind of oddly invasive feeling as well.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, because the arbitrary nature of the rules, the landlord gets to dictate things, and sometimes you've got no right of appeal. You feel like this is having a real impact in my life. We had a takedown of a really key video, and we tried to appeal, and you realise that it's totally in vain because they have no level of accountability to you, an individual.
Yeah, and they do that because they think they're looking out for artists, but I don't think that these platforms should be the arbiters of what's good for artists. Do you know what I mean? But that's a different conversation.
Yeah, also because so much of it's just automated and not dealing with a person, but yeah.
But in doing that, you kind of surrender to extraction in the form of them kind of just hoovering up like all of your data and using that to feed you ads and to surveil you and to manipulate you. I mean, and that sounds like conspiratorial nonsense, but it's not.
No,
there's a lot of evidence of this.
It's almost a cliche now. Like, if you think it's free, it's because you are the currency. It's like, if you get something for free, it's because your data is the valuable commodity that you're actually surrendering there.
And I could go into so much detail about why how that happened and why it happened. All I would say is read Surveillance Capitalism by Susanna Zupoff. That gives you a really good look as to how this happened and how it's kind of morphed into this really horrible thing. Anyway, in his book, Cory Doctorow emphasises that these things also do network lock-in. He also calls it switching costs. It's essentially this idea that it's incredibly difficult to leave these platforms and go elsewhere quite deliberately because none of these platforms talk directly to one another.
Well, almost none of them.
Yeah, which discourages movement. That's called, so being able to talk to one another is called interoperability, right? And that's always been a really difficult thing for tech companies to do because they want to own everything. They want to be the people that just have the complete power.
There are real world examples of that as well. When companies change the plugs and the adapters and something, so you can't take your old shit with you. It's like, no, if you want to leave, there's going to be a cost, and that cost is what disincentivizes you from actually moving on.
But a good example of this in action is, and we actually joke about this all the time in the podcast, is we've got a Facebook group, right, which is our Patreon. You can get access to that if you join our Patreon.
Yeah, I never thought I would say this, but it's a good place to be. It's the only good place to be on the whole of Facebook.
Yeah, and when we talk about this, we qualify it by saying, Facebook is rubbish and it's all full of boomers and racist stuff, and that's true. And we always talk about it in really apologetic tones, of course we do. But we're locked into that platform. We were talking yesterday about how...
Can we get rid of this?
How can we get rid of this, yeah. And
we don't want to lose touch with the people that are on there. And not everybody wants to move to something like Discord or Telegram or anything.
Because nobody wants to set up another platform, right? They just don't want to do that. And also, they're on that platform because they've got probably family and friends on there that they just really wouldn't talk to otherwise. So yeah, they're locked in, we're locked in, most of the world is locked in on Facebook. So the irony of all that is not really lost on us because we're also locked in and we can't really get out of it.
Yeah.
This kind of overlaps really nicely with an idea put forth by Yanis Varoufakis. He wrote a book recently called Technofeudalism, What Killed Capitalism. And his view is that all these tech companies have fundamentally changed the way the world economy works. Digital landlords, Meta, Google, Spotify, they control cloud estates, and the users and the businesses that use this become cloud serfs, like people that work the land and feudal fiefdoms, and they all depend on this platform for access to markets, communication and visibility. It's starting to sound a bit familiar?
Yeah, I mean, a great way, a real world example is try and open a music venue without any social media. Try and open a restaurant nowadays without any social media.
Try and be a photographer. Try and be anything without social media.
Yeah, these things that used to actually function quite well before social media now barely function and are very unsustainable without social media. And that is as a result of creating this need, this essential need, but being guardians of it.
I'm going to say something right now, and I hope people listen to me when I say this. We need to stop calling it social media. We've got to call it platforms because there's not very much social about it anymore.
Right.
Platforms dictate the terms and they extract the rents rather than ceding to like market competition on price and productivity. So, the market doesn't dictate the price, doesn't dictate productivity.
Yeah.
The feudal lords go, here's an algorithm that tells you how this works and you need to play to those rules, essentially. So if you use any of these services, and I really hate to use this term here, but it makes sense because ultimately, if you're a content creator, whether you're a band, whether you're an author, or if you're just somebody that likes to post their photos on Instagram.
I think that's a key point there, right? So we're talking about music here. We're talking about bands as content creators. You're a writer. You get writers as content creators. You get filmmakers. But also, if you are someone that takes a photo of a coffee and puts it on Instagram, you're a content creator in the eyes of Instagram.
Whether you like it or not, you are. And these algorithms track everything you upload, right? They track the amount of time you spend on the platform, the amount of time you spend looking at content, what you search for, what you buy, who you talk to, where you go in the world, not just online, but in the world, but also online. Yeah. Every single action you take is used by platforms such as Spotify, Google, and Meta, and well, pretty much all of them really, to generate income.
Yeah. So that's kind of analogous to musicians who, in order to even be in the conversation, the wider conversation, need to surrender their labour, i.e. their music, for almost nothing, lest they are somewhat prevented from participating in their own society. They need to put their music on these platforms to even be entertained as like a viable, serious entity. These platforms are so pivotal to all other aspects of being heard or acknowledged in music now. I mean, this includes even being covered for an article. If you don't have a Spotify, it's very unlikely that any journalist is going to cover it, you know? And there are, especially now that there are no realistic alternatives.
Yeah, and so just like the modern music industry, pretty much all the modern society and discourse takes place online, uses digital, payments are digital, essential services are increasingly online.
Yeah.
To simply access these digital town squares, if that's what you want to call them, and thus participate in society.
Well, that's kind of why I like the town squares analogy there, actually, because it is just about milling about and living a normal life. Like, that is what they now represent. Everyday shit.
Yeah. We're expected to endlessly create content and surrender that content
just to be there.
You know?
I mean, absolutely. Can you tie that back into the discussion of the Techsodus or the decision to leave these platforms such as Spotify?
Yeah, so a few questions, right? I will ask them. You can make up your own mind on them. If artists are leaving platforms because they don't feel as though they're getting treated fairly, why are they still posting on social media platforms to promote their wares when their hard work is not rewarded there? And to be fair, in some cases, they're having to pay money to get content created to go on those platforms, which comes out of the bottom line for the band anyway, right? As music fans, is it really sensible or fair to ask artists to partake in this cycle in order to promote their wares whilst also being ripped off by streaming platforms and not getting paid fairly for their wares?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people expect to hear about their favourite artists on Twitter or Insta or Facebook. They expect them to be maintaining those. The artist doesn't necessarily have that much of a choice unless they're a very particular artist that has that sort of image. But basically, we all expect them to interact. I mean, imagine Taylor Swift if she just went offline.
Taylor Swift probably could go offline. That's probably not a great example.
I actually don't think she could.
No. But I will leave you to answer those questions on your own. I think by the tone that I've used so far that you already know what my answer is to that.
So streaming, and especially Spotify, has been problematic since before even its inception, as we said, going right back to Napster and stuff. And I think I want to get this on record here to prove my very mixed feelings, Mark. I'd like to submit to the record, to the jury, my holiday photo from my trip to Stockholm of me shooting Spotify's HQ at an extremely dirty look.
And if you're on YouTube, it's right here already.
Can you have that acknowledged, please?
Yeah, that's acknowledged. I'll put it in the show notes if you're on just, I guess, Spotify, listen to it. Oh, the irony.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you can put pictures on Spotify's show notes, but I'll put a link to it, I guess.
Just put it as the episode art.
I could actually, yeah. So here's a few things to think about with Spotify, right? Some key things perhaps to realise. They're a tech company. They're a tech company. They don't care about artists, mate, right? They're a tech company. They beat all of their competitors.
They're not, again, just to illustrate that, they are not your friendly local record shop owner that opened it because he loved the Rolling Stones and just had to spread the word and say it. They're not that.
Yeah, they don't care, right? They don't care about you or your taste either, really. But they are a tech company and they beat all of their competitors by basically being the best tech company. They were the first to adopt cloud technology, so their service was faster than their competitors at the time. One I remember was called Grooveshark, actually.
Yeah, I remember
which was browser-based, and it was pretty slow, but it had everything on it. I think it was illegal, though. They pioneered the mapping of users' tastes, otherwise known as the algorithms that power all the discovery things on Spotify. Largely, they bought up companies, which were really good at that, which we spoke about in a Playol episode. And they also just got really good engineers who'd come in and be really good. Yeah. The guy that created one of the key algorithms actually was fired, I think, a couple of years ago, and he created a website which is essentially, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it. You see like a big musical map, and you can type in a genre, and it will just like show you everything that spins off it. It's really cool. That's very, very, very cool. Yeah. They were also the first. It doesn't really happen anymore because of the way the net. Oh fuck! How old do I sound?
Yeah, goodness me. Netscape.
Yeah, it doesn't really happen anymore because of how all these platforms are no longer interlinked. But they were the first to kind of link their platform to others like Facebook and Tinder and Pinterest and all that. And they were also just really good at getting human curators who would actually come in and create editorial playlists that kind of powered artist discovery. And yeah, you know, not only were they able to outmaneuver all the competitors in the early days, but they were also able to entice the big three majors to be early shareholders in the business. I don't think they are anymore, but
that was huge, man. That was huge. I mean, you said it yourself. The labels who previously took them to court and saw Spotify as like an extinction level event in waiting were now in on the operation.
Yeah, Warner Brothers were the big holdout, and that's worth looking into, by the way. The guy that started Facebook and the guy that started Napster, Sean Parker. Google that; it's really interesting. But they basically combined their abilities with all of this and their ability to raise lots of money via venture capital to then just shove that into marketing. And it meant that by the mid-2010s, they had an unassailable lead in streaming, and they still have an unassailable lead in streaming. Yeah. They've got 31% market share. The second biggest is Tencent with 14% market share, and that is only in China. Interesting. In 2024, they reported 263 million subscribers and 675 million monthly users.
So by users, we're talking about individuals here, like individual people.
Regular users. They're really impressive numbers, right? But it was actually, when I was doing these notes, this was actually the thing that came to me towards the end of it. It strikes me that Spotify's audience isn't actually built on people who love music enough to pay for it. It's actually built on nearly 2/3 of the audience, which is 412 million people who use the free tier, who don't actually pay for Spotify. Yeah. And there are no other platforms that come anywhere even close to this in terms of numbers or offering something in the marketplace.
Yeah, because if you take away the free tier, 263 million subs, you're into the realms of their competitors again.
Absolutely, yeah. So platforms like YouTube Music, Deezer, they've got free tiers, but they're severely limited technologically. You can use Amazon Music's free tier, but it only gives you curated stations, not access to full catalogues. And then you've got niche-focused ones like SoundCloud, which I think has the most amount of artists on it, but most of it's independent artists. There's functionality drawbacks. Like I said, YouTube Music doesn't play unless you pay for it, and if you don't pay for it, you can only listen to it with your screen on. Apple Music, Tidal, Amazon Music Unlimited, they don't have free tiers, and they kind of force you to pay for it, which means that Spotify is the only platform which gives away the entire music canon, the entire catalogue of music, more or less, to like 90% for free, with ads. It's ads. I mean, it's not totally free. Nothing's totally free anymore.
We've already addressed that. You know, the data you're giving away is not valueless.
So this means that any competitor that wants to challenge Spotify needs to kind of hemorrhage cash by offering the full catalogue of music for free at incredible scale. And that's something that the basic economics just do not support. No. You know, Spotify's early lead means that they will forever be unassailable because nobody has the cash.
I wouldn't say forever because we don't know what will happen, but yes, I do take on board.
That's true. You're right. I shouldn't be so absolute about it. You're correct. So while some might see Spotify as having democratized music access, it's kind of equally true to say that they've built an entire business model around people that don't actually care about music in any meaningful capacity.
Yeah.
412 million free users are the foundation of their dominance, and that nobody can compete on those terms.
Yeah, so I mean, basically Spotify doesn't get to be Spotify as we know it without devaluing music to the point of almost zero for a public that is only too happy to get free shit. And that is not an unforeseen consequence. That is the business model.
Yeah, I mean, it was first filled with pirate music. Tells you everything you need to know. But yeah, so people will go, and I've had this conversation online with a bunch of folk on Twitter.
I mean, that is your first mistake.
That's my first mistake. But people who I guess I have some kind of intellectual kinship with, I suppose, and they will often say, like, why don't you just I know artists that just use Bandcamp and they sell records on Bandcamp, or why don't you just switch to Tidal? But both of these things kind of miss this point entirely, right? Spotify has created a market dynamic where free access to everything is the baseline expectation. It's what people expect to happen, right? Yeah. And that has been totally normalized. No competitor can even challenge that without incurring massive losses. I dare say Apple maybe could, but...
No, because if Apple went free, they would lose their subscribers, or they would have to have a system in place that made those subscribers keep paying but bring on hundreds of millions of new free users. I just don't see how that would work unless they did a loss leader thing, unless they they just decided, right, we're going to do this to try and even the playing field.
Yeah. So really, the only way out of this is going back to the iTunes model. We're talking about Apple there, going back to Apple again. It's just basically to sell music directly to fans at a fair price, which is what Bandcamp does. But is it possible that Bandcamp can save us from streaming platforms someday?
A lot of people have a lot of love for Bandcamp. I realise that that's diminished somewhat recently because of some complexities around their ownership and pricing and things, but people still place a lot of faith in Bandcamp's ability to create a slightly more equitable system. For example, Godspeed You, Black Emperor have abandoned every service bar Bandcamp.
Sure, but I mean, the hope that Bandcamp will save us from this mire is, well, I don't think that's really realistic, to be honest, because Bandcamp's got a fundamentally different business model to streaming platforms.
Yeah,
period.
Apples and oranges, really, isn't it?
It is, in effect, like we said, a digital record store. It has way more in common with iTunes than it will ever have in common with Spotify, right? And that's obviously by design, because it genuinely appears, as we've just discussed the economics of this earlier on, it feels like it's actually impossible to compensate artists fairly on streaming services.
Yeah.
And Bandcamp isn't even the answer, you know. Even if they did launch a streaming service, it'd never really work. Their platform exists to allow artists to sell music at a cost of their choosing, and then Bandcamp makes revenue from that cost. I think it's like, is it 30%? I can't remember. I haven't sold anything on Bandcamp for a long time, Chris.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't definitively tell you. They have their Bandcamp Fridays when people push things heavily.
And they waive the fee on Bandcamp Fridays once a month.
I know they also, certainly they used to do concessionary rates for charity stuff because we benefited from that. They reduced the rates to like pretty low level for us for some things.
And sure, like when you buy stuff on Bandcamp, or if you get given gifts on Bandcamp by your favourite podcast in the world, you can listen to them in the Bandcamp app, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear, when we're talking about those fractions of pennies earlier on, even though people have qualms with Bandcamp, the revenue that you would get from selling one song on Bandcamp for, let's say, $1 is literally 100, 1,000 times, depending on what your label takes, what you would get elsewhere.
Yeah, but the Bandcamp app itself lacks all the features and functionality that have made streaming platforms so popular and, I would argue, addictive.
Yeah, people often miss the point of why streaming is so popular. On Bandcamp, you buy a car. On Spotify, you could just constantly test drive any car you like. Oh, that looks fun. I'll take that. Oh, no, 3 minutes. 20 seconds in, no, I didn't like that Porsche very much. I'll shift over to this McLaren. You know, no boredom, no buyer's remorse. It's too good to be true. And I think, as we're kind of saying, it maybe isn't entirely true. It's not a sustainable model. But
actually, when you think about it for a second, right, and just for a second, it's actually kind of wild that a lot of people aren't really bothered about owning music. But, you know, perhaps
it'll not be like that when the grid goes down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? when the end times come.
Hopefully it's soon. But I think perhaps the real killer feature for streaming platforms and the way they can actually be good for artists in a way that Bandcamp can't be is discoverability.
I mean, Bandcamp's tried, but I see where you're going with this, yeah.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like aloe or skins, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. With Shop Pay, that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts are going abandoned and way more sales happening. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whatever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Skins uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
This episode brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can get a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help find you options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Got an idea for an app? With Base 44, you don't need to know a single line of code. Just describe what you want, and Base 44 instantly designs the interface, builds the database, and connects the logic for you. Whether it's tracking invoices, planning meals, or managing a whole team, you can build at the speed of thought and customize it as you go. Stop waiting on developers. Start running your business smarter with Base 44. Visit base44.com and turn your idea into a live app today.
For me, the reason why most artists probably shouldn't leave Spotify is discoverability.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so big artists who already make their money from touring, who've got established fan bases, pulling that music from Spotify isn't such a big deal.
Maybe, yeah.
In fact, if you think about it, the incentive is actually wrong. They've got the least to lose from pulling their music from Spotify because they've already got a fan base, right? So maybe it makes them harder to get new fans, pure new fans. But I mean, lots of these artists are really comfortable where they are and they see more value in maintaining their existing base and incrementally adding to it via touring or other traditional means.
Yeah. Personally, I think that branding is also a key consideration there because, and don't get me wrong, the bands may be totally sincere about this and not considering branding at all, but many of the groups and labels not on Spotify, it really fits with perceptions of them being outliers, of them being quite counterculture.
That's quite cynical, Chris.
Well, yeah, it is, but I don't think it's unrealistic. I mean, Drag City, Deerhoof, Godspeed You, Black Emperor, they're all seen and they're all loved really for being on the fringes. They're still successful, but they're on the fringes, you know, counterculture. If anything, I would suggest that the gesture of leaving Spotify probably just makes their existing fans love them more. They probably saw that announcement and they were like, God, I love Deerhoof. I love it when they do shit like this and really stick it to the man. But and that's worth a lot, brand loyalty. I'm sorry to bring it down to that. I didn't study marketing, but I think there's no getting away from that. Like, we are all, to some extent, present ourselves outwardly a brand. I think incredibly naive to not think that Godspeed You, Black Emperor are mindful of what does and doesn't seem like something Godspeed You, Black Emperor would do.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. And I think you're probably right. Do you think it's had a measurable impact on the people that actually have left because the bands have done that? I'm not sure it would be a huge number. There will be some, of course. But anyway, you know, meanwhile, if you're a new artist, right, you actually put yourself at risk of not being discovered by avoiding streaming platforms.
Yeah, definitely.
There's two reasons for this, right? Merchandise sales are a fraction of what they used to be. It's really hard to sell records at a small show, especially if folk don't know who you are. So having your music be easily available makes it quite a lot easier for people to check you out after a gig.
Yeah, I mean, that's the bread and butter of being in a band now. I think anybody who's maybe of our age but not in music all the time maybe still thinks that you do the gig and you stand at the desk afterwards and chat to people as they gobble up your records.
Which you should do. You should talk to them, but they're not buying records.
But this is the thing, that it's like, it doesn't work like that anymore. You know, even if you're just passing through town, you might never play there again. It's like, it's the one chance for them to get a record, whatever. A lot of people will pass up that chance and be like, oh yeah, what's the name? Type it into their phone and fuck off. And that's, you know, like, okay, good, they're going to look us up on streaming and we'll get 0.00, you know. You should be glad that they're checking you out, but this is exactly what we're talking about. You're now glad that someone is going to check you out and you'll be remunerated to a fraction of a penny, rather than them buying your record as an opportunity to really hold and own and invest in music they loved.
Yeah, and you know, if music's available online and you're also doing a lot of work on social media to build your profile,
so much work.
You'll make fans so much easier if your music is in a convenient place for them.
I mean, people, again, if you're someone that likes music but aren't involved in it, you have no idea the amount of admin that is involved in trying to maintain multiple platforms, because as you said, you can't post across them all that easily all the time, and it is an exhausting and frankly really off-putting aspect of being a musician now.
Yeah, platform capitalism fucking sucks, man, doesn't it? In terms of progressing and growing, right, these days record labels, agents, journalists, managers, promoters, pretty much anybody that's involved that's not in your band are looking at your stats.
Yes.
That's followers, it's likes, it's Spotify monthly listeners, it's plays on a track, it's everything, you know.
Absolutely.
And they'll make a judgment on whether or not you're worth working with based on this figure. How many times, right? Question for you. Many times have you, as a band, come across your purview on Spotify and you've checked it and you've seen less than 100 and you're like, I'm not going to listen to that?
Okay, I can't give you an answer there, but I'll come back at you with a better example, perhaps from my particular profession. So I book a venue, and it is absolutely normal now for what used to be, things about where a band has toured, things about who a band has collaborated with, who produced a record, to now be replaced with 56k streams per month on such and such.
And the copy you get sent?
Yeah, 2,400. This is in their gig bio.
Basically their sort of press pack or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And this is like before you get any sort of sense of what they sound like, who they've worked with, how long they've been a band, where have they travelled, have they even travelled, have they never left their hometown? Yeah, and what they're reflecting are the expectations, I assume, of all of these other promoters. Journalists are not exempt from this, because journalists, as one, were incredibly fucking lazy. Oh, I've got 12 hours till deadline. What am I going to do? I'll just Google this shit. I'll check it. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. So unfortunately, these are the metrics that people are now using to decide how they're going to apportion their time.
That's really, really interesting.
So I think we could say that the luxury of taking this position is really dependent on a couple of factors. Are you maybe already in a niche genre with modest expectations? Let's say you're in a noise band, you're in experimental power electronics, right? You maybe don't ever expect to have widespread acclaim or following, so you're quite content to maybe be off of these platforms because they don't really offer you much anyway, so you're happy with the lower chances of recognition. Or, as you mentioned, do you already have a loyal fan base? Other than those, I would say there is a real unavoidable cost attached. I actually came across, I think it was the Black Keys talking about this. It was directly addressed a specific issue. They were already a reasonably established and moderately successful rock band at the time of Spotify really coming onto the scene. And the Black Keys declined to use Spotify for two of their really big records. It was 2011, they did an album called El Camino, and I think it was Turn Blue that was a couple of years later. They then backtracked on that later, and I think the quote is, taking a stand definitely hurt us in the long run. So by not having those two records on there, they were a living proof of how much that can knock you off your or damage your momentum.
I mean, there's also a moral angle here, though, right? Like, there's actually two moral angles, really, when you think about it. And I think they're both largely performative.
Oh, you're calling me cynical?
Yeah, I know. Come at me. The first one is kind of churlishly put down to artists make a pittance on Spotify/streaming platforms, and therefore you, as a consumer, should also boycott Spotify/all streaming platforms until this is rectified.
Until this is rectified, like that's going to happen.
Yeah. And you know what? There is actually a good point in here somewhere, right?
There is. I mean, it's a very fair point to reflect on the revenue.
Few artists are getting paid sufficiently for their work. We've just illustrated that to be the case. But in order for us to actually fully understand the scale of the rot that there is here, we kind of need to effectively address it. And we did actually hint at this with Technofeudalism earlier on, right? Yeah. Spotify itself isn't really the disease. You could argue that it is the vector for the disease, but it's mostly a symptom of the disease, right?
It's a symptom, yeah.
The disease, as we outlined earlier on, is technofeudalism itself.
The internet's the vector.
Yeah. Platform capitalism, or the net, as I called it earlier on. Yeah. This new terminology.
World Wide Web.
Yeah. Spotify and streaming is, I guess, from a user perspective at least, largely a means to get your music out there, right? When you start getting big, that relationship maybe changes a little bit, but very few artists ever had it big enough for this to become a factor.
Yeah, I mean, that's not going to be an issue for most of us, sadly.
So yeah, you can stand up for artists' rights by taking the moral position of not using streaming platforms, but how exactly do we realistically expect artists to grow their audience if they remove themselves from these dominant services? The vast majority of artists are not making any substantial revenue from streaming platforms at all, that includes Spotify. They're doing it from shows and merch, which has always been the case.
It sure has.
So what, right? So what? As stated earlier, the market now expects music to be available either cheaply or freely. It seems unlikely that that'll ever change in our lifetimes. Changing it will be a generational project, is kind of what I'm saying here, right? In fact, it probably will just get worse. There will be shitification of these platforms. And shitification is a great word.
It is.
Doctor out again, Google that shit. So I would suggest that the only way that you can really take a coherent moral stance against this situation is by doing one of the following things.
Mark's guides to life is
I never make these things on this podcast.
Jordan
right?
Peterson moment.
I know I never do this, man, because I don't want to be seen to be like a Jordan Peterson style guy, but I kind of need to lay it out because you don't have a lot of options here, otherwise you'll look a bit like a hypocrite, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if you're an artist with a following, in order for your action of leaving Spotify to be truly meaningful, you have to extract yourself entirely from all streaming platforms. In my view, this is the only practical solution for big artists. Picking and choosing the platforms you want to use and be a part of doesn't really help address the extractive practices that these platforms use.
Yeah, because with the exception of Bandcamp, let's say, they're all at it to a greater or lesser extent.
It's a good word, and it's a good way of putting it, sorry. If you're a small artist who's got grand ambitions, I sadly think you might just need to play this horrible game. I think it's possible to carve out a career without streaming platforms, but you'll need to grind really hard to do it, and you will come up against friction with people really regularly, and you'll just need to make peace with the fact that your reach is going to be definitionally limited.
Yeah.
And if you're a consumer, then the only way to truly step outside of this is to utterly remove yourself from all streaming services. And if you do that, I think you can probably stand on much more solid moral ground. Swapping one for another doesn't really cut it because there's no fair streaming platform.
Yeah, so I think you've hit on something really key there with the word consumer, but we can revisit that at the end.
Ultimately, though, I think whether you leave them or not, one thing will be true. You say it all the time. Support the artist directly. Go to a show, buy some goddamn merch, buy some records, share them with your friends, encourage people to materially support them in any way you can.
Do you know any creators that could use some material support, Mark?
Well, let's speak about material support. We've got a Patreon. We've brought it up a few times. Patreon.com/unsungpod. You can materially support us there to the tune of a minimum £4 or whatever your local currency equivalent is per month. You'll get access to our Facebook group. We've discussed it already.
Awkward.
You also get access to bonus episodes, which are probably going to be happening mostly on the off weeks of this podcast. You'll get access to us, whether that's a bonus.
Steady on.
Whether that's a bonus or not is entirely up to you. And there might be some more writing coming out in the coming weeks and months, which you'll get access to early as well. And you can influence some of these bonus episodes by suggesting records we could do and all that, like the old days.
Yeah, there's also there's a kind of record club here that allow us to support creators on your behalf. So you support us, and then we use a portion of that money to support bands and independent labels. We buy the stuff specifically on Bandcamp. That is not a complete endorsement of Bandcamp, but as we said, it's the place where these artists get the most money. And we buy records from artists from all over the world that we spend a fair bit of time digging into and finding for you from recommendations from our various contacts. And once a month, we send you those albums so that you get a little present for yourself. So you get all the stuff Mark described, all the extra access. The bands get your support financially. They get these audiences across the world hearing their stuff, and you get a little treat once a month. You don't know what it's going to be. It will be within margins that you give us, So if you like black metal and folk, we'll try and cater to that, you know what I mean? But point is, you're supporting a lot of different people in the one go there. Yeah,
so we actually don't just spew rhetoric on this. We actually do literally put our money where our mouth is, not just for the pod, but also individually as well. Because personally, I feel as though as long as we're doing that, we can also use streaming platforms with a clear-ish conscience.
Yeah, I mean, we have to admit, we use streaming platforms a lot in the research for these shows. Life would be very, very difficult.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, and this certainly isn't a perfect world, and I just generally think that moral absolutes in most fields are fairly untenable. I agree that there are places of compromise that should enable the vast majority of people to sort of sleep soundly, and that is probably one. If you want to use streaming platforms, there is a lot to be said for them. There is a lot of good that come out of them. But I think you do have to be willing to offset that with gestures and acts of actual material support for the people that you maybe find through those platforms.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I totally agree with that. Okay, so at the start of this little bit here, I spoke about two things. Mm-hmm. One was you should boycott Spotify because they don't play artists. And the other one was, well, Spotify indirectly funnels money into arms companies. So arms companies and stuff.
Yeah, here we go. So let's maybe revisit this, why this current batch of bands that we're talking about that caught everyone's attention have left Spotify in particular.
Now, I completely understand why artists and consumers are really uncomfortable with Daniel Ek like funneling 600 million euros of his own money into the German defence technology company Helsing, which specialises in AI-driven autonomous weapon systems.
Yeah, if we revisit some of those names from earlier who bailed on Spotify, so Deerhoof.
Behold my house of light.
They announced, quote, we don't want our music killing people, we don't want our success being tied to AI battle tech.
That's a straw man, right?
I don't know that it is, but and they branded Spotify itself a data mining scam and a get-rich-quick scheme, which I'm inclined to not disagree with. King Gizzard said, we just removed our music from the platform. Can we put pressure on these Dr. Evil tech bros to do better? ? Juju said, we are currently working to take all of our music off of garbage hole Armageddon portal Spotify. A label called the Kalahari Oyster Cult pulled their entire catalogue. They announced, quote, in consultation with the artists we represent, we don't want our music contributing to or benefiting a platform led by someone backing tools of war, surveillance and violence. And that, I think, the shoegazy band Hotline TNT, their statement seemed to frame it as one big element in a broader kind of ideological schism. The company that bills itself as a steward of all recorded music has proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that it does not align with this band's values in any way. Now, we've mentioned them a couple of times, Godspeed You, Black Emperor. They made no statement, but I think the timing-wise, it was fairly obvious they just couldn't hack it any longer. I have to admit, actually, they were one of the bands that I was quite surprised when they did appear on Spotify. Given the famous arms companies to record labels diagram artwork that they had on their Yankee UXO album, we've talked about this before in the Godspeed You Black Emperor episode, they could hardly ignore it. It'd be incredibly hypocritical to ignore it, given that, as I say, they left all streaming bar Bandcamp, maybe recognising much of what you described in terms of the hypocrisy of leaving one but not the other. Godspeed are a very thoughtful band. They're a band and a collective that I hugely admire. That doesn't mean they're exempt from criticism. You know, in the spirit of that comment I made about untenable moral absolutism, our Godspeed episode, for example, showed they have a history of what I would say are somewhat inconsistent decisions. You know, for example, during the original BDS movement, they boycotted Israel, yet went and toured in China, which happened during the time of the Uyghur Muslim ethnic cleansing, which I think was really questionable as an action. And Godspeed, to their credit, don't use any socials. And as it happens, I doubt they listen to the show either. Mm-hmm. Maybe summing all of that up, though, a musician called David Bridie wrote an op-ed for The Guardian under the headline, Spotify used to seem like a necessary evil for musicians, now it just seems evil. And he continued, Ek isn't paid a salary by Spotify, he takes a share of its stock. Last year alone, cashing out a reported $345 million. So here we are, artists helping to build algorithms to sell our music, and the success of that algorithm determines the flow of wealth to a man who invests in building machines that could kill people.
I mean, that's seriously malevolent stuff.
Yeah.
Can't really defend them for that. And to be fair,
throwing money into machines of death.
yeah, and I kind of just want to say before we go any further that also we're not this is not a defense of Spotify. This episode's not a defense of Spotify.
Well, I don't think anyone would confuse it with that.
But yeah, like you said, throwing money into machines of death is definitely not a cool thing to do, right? And I often wonder how people sleep at night who do that, right? Who actually invest in arms companies who work for them, for fuck's sake. But if artists and consumers are serious about these concerns, then they kind of need to think bigger than Spotify. Because otherwise, stepping off that platform simply because of his own personal investments and not doing anything else just looks like a symbolic gesture. A wee bit of moral posturing that probably makes people feel good about exercising some control in a world where we have so little.
Yeah, it's kind of lip service, isn't it?
Yeah, the simple fact of the matter is that Spotify is not the only tech titan with ties to weapons. And the reason I say all that is because I want to acknowledge the fact this is quite a complex thing. I don't want to do a bit of whataboutery here,
Yeah, well, I would say that a band like Godspeed would be totally behind you here because they're one of these people that believe in being fairly thorough with your thought, as that album cover illustrates.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like aloe or skins, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. With Shop Pay, that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts are going abandoned and way more sales happening. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whatever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Skins uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Say what you want about AI, but it's here. And it's helping businesses get more done in a day. Wix's website builder is infused with AI so you can stay ahead. Create a beautiful, functional website just by describing your idea. Track how your site appears in AI search results. Create custom images on demand, or launch an entire campaign in a matter of minutes. Wix gives you AI wherever you need it. Try it now for free at wix.com.
So let's talk about Google. Fucking Google. Yeah, we're
colourful
on YouTube.
Google, colourful, bouncy, round-lettered Google with their white screen. What could possibly be nefarious about that?
Don't be evil used to be their motto.
Keep up now.
They have met, so they've got a laundry list of crimes, I guess you could put in the evil category. But the one you're talking about, BDS, a second ago, mentioning Israel and Palestine, good example of, okay, maybe they're not investing directly in arms, but they're certainly propping up some elements of defence industry and governments.
But is anything they do contributing in a material way to the probable deaths of people?
Well,
especially innocent people.
Yeah, so let's talk about Project Nimbus. Project Nimbus is a cloud computing, machine learning and AI project which is used by the Israeli government and its military. It's been used to surveil and collect unlawful data on Palestinians and facilitate the illegal expansion of the West Bank settlements.
Yeah, I mean, the Israeli government or the IDF, neither of them have a particularly good reputation.
Yeah. There's also concern that it's been used as part of a thing called the Gospel, and the Gospel is an AI system that's used by the Israeli Defence Force, the IDF, that makes decisions on where and what it should bomb.
What a sick fucking twist in a name that is as well, the Gospel.
And in April 2024, Google actually fired 50 employees who protested this situation. And it's
freedom
not
of speech, yeah?
Yeah, it's not just Israel. Like Google recently won a $200 million contract with the US Department of Defense And that's after their cooperation on the US Project PRISM, which gave the NSA access to people's data and is one of the things that Edward Snowden talked about in his leak.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget as well that Google helped to censor the Chinese internet at the Chinese government's behest. They also had plans to launch a thing called Project Dragonfly in 2018, which was a kind of new Chinese version of Google, a CCP approved version of Google that tracked people's data and location and fed it back to the government. It was thankfully later abandoned by Alphabet.
None of this even takes into account all of the other nefarious shit that Google has been doing for years, right? In order to assert their own dominance over the tech world, they bought so many competitors, which has led to antitrust violations, which has just been in the news recently, and the absolute havoc that's been wrought by the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask. Are we all leaving YouTube as a consequence? Because YouTube is a fucking cesspit.
But it's also super fucking useful. You know, that's the thing. And that's how they get you, right? And then let's talk about the other really big tech platform that there is out there. Meta. Fucking Meta are the fucking worst company in the world, right? They just are the worst company in the world. If we just want to stick to military tech alone, Meta are now a defense contractor because they're partnered with Andrew Industries, giving these VR headsets to soldiers and stuff so they can make better timed battlefield decisions. But yeah, that's just wonderful stuff. And that's not even accounting for all the real dodgy shit that Facebook/Meta are responsible for. Their own rampant antitrust practices, their own censorship of Palestinian content on their platforms. They show ads for houses being built illegally in the West Bank, just seeding chaos in various elections, particularly the US in 2016, Brexit. The list can go on.
And also just helping to destroy the notion of objective reality and facts. You know, like
facts.
Fucking publicly giving up on it. Like Zuckerberg recently saying, we're going to stop trying to fact check things because we think it'll just work itself out.
Man, there's so much good literature out there and podcasts about how Zuckerberg turned the way he did. Seek it out. It's worth watching and worth listening to and worth reading. But ultimately what I'm saying here is that arms investments and working with defence companies are very, very obviously problematic. But selectively boycotting Spotify whilst we're still embedded in these systems, and embedded is the key word here, it is the key adjective to use here, because we are all embedded in these systems. If we're not boycotting them, then just boycotting Spotify itself isn't particularly meaningful.
I can see the argument, yeah.
And, you know, I do see the irony behind this because A, this podcast's on YouTube, B, we promote it on Meta platforms, and C, our biggest audience is just for a fact on Spotify.
Yeah, well, I think that in itself underlines your point about, let's say, smaller bands sabotaging their sustainability by leaving the platforms, because I know our numbers and losing the Spotify audience would be catastrophic for us. So it's all very well people saying, oh, you should make a big kind of thing of it and publicly tell everyone you're coming off Spotify. What would you, 60% of our audience we would lose? And yes, some of them might track us down. But seriously, this is a very hard thing to do. Mark and I don't get any money out of the podcast for this. This is all put back in. This is 8 years of it. And that act would threaten the longevity of the show, full stop. And I can only imagine that is the same, probably even more so, for so many bands.
It never used to be this way for us, though, right? Because back in the day, for the first 6 years, probably this podcast, it was mostly Apple iTunes users, and then it was all the kind of bitty other podcast platforms
and
made up the rest of it. Yeah. I think iTunes at the time was about 40%. So that's not just a shift away from that, it's a huge shift. And we can't square that away, really, if we want to survive.
Where does that leave you then?
Well, I was really reticent to write this bit, and after I wrote it, I kind of messaged you and I said, it actually makes me really sad.
I just bummed myself out.
Because we've pulled together all these different strands of theory and other thoughts around about this, but we don't have a theoretical framework about how to move forward next. We don't have an answer. I don't think there is any way to fix this, right? I'll be clear though, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with artists taking a stance and saying that leaving Spotify isn't a meaningful act of protest. But for me, the problem is just wider than Spotify. It's about the way the internet works in general. It is about platform capitalism. It's about technofeudalism. Yeah,
people do what they can, and sometimes a small act like that does have meaning. It's just not the solution. When it's isolated like that.
Yeah, and I personally don't think there's a strong moral argument for artists to leave one platform for things like lack of fairness and royalty payments when they're also spending time just shoving content into other platforms for free. You've spoken earlier on about how onerous it is to create for these various platforms, you know. Yes, okay, investing in arms is deeply problematic. People just shouldn't do it, right?
This is Mark's pro-arms industry mic drop bombshell.
People shouldn't do it, right? I'm fairly certain I'm against that. But I really don't think there's a strong moral argument to leave Spotify because of that when all the biggest tech companies in the world are complicit in similar dealings. Earlier on when I spoke about the fact that
By the way, can I just say, this is effectively my Brewdog argument, right?
Yeah.
This is this thing where
Same.
people getting their high horse about taking a stand against Brewdog, and you're like, you realise that like...
AB InBev fucking invest in arms companies, for example. You know what I mean?
That's absurd when you're drinking like things from Coors and Heineken and
exactly. And we're embedded in these platforms. If you want to leave the internet, then cool, fucking do it. There's actually evidence that it's rotting our brains for fucking sure, man. If you want to leave the internet, then please do it. You'll probably feel so much better as an individual. Do I think that change is possible? Honestly, no, I don't think these platforms are going to get any better. In fact, we actually know they're getting worse because Spotify now doesn't pay anyone that's got less than 1,000 streams per month. Now, I know 1,000 streams is nothing. It's less than a penny, right? It just tells you what we've said earlier on, right? They intrinsically do not value art. And perhaps, given the 412 million people that use free Spotify, the public at large do not value art either.
Yeah, again, I hinted at it earlier on, but I think what you've just said is the crux here. The entire issue is irreconcilable for me when viewed from the artist's perspective. Shouldn't they leave platforms? Should they sacrifice X amount of revenue as a moral, act? Should they seek to piss against the hurricane of massive tech? The market got us here. There's a book, How Music Got Free. That's another thing that I would recommend people read to try and understand, like where did this notion that music is a valueless commodity really come from? The problem for me is human nature. Now, I'm in danger of broadening it to the point of absolute meaninglessness here, but what I'm saying is, what percentage of humans will pay for something they can get for free, even without any real financial hardship? It's all very well saying, times of austerity and all that. No. Forget that, man. Regardless of financial pressure, a huge majority of people will still not pay for something if they can get it for free. A disturbingly small and quite select percentage of enthusiasts and devotees will still do it because it feels right, or because they maybe have a greater understanding of the mechanics of it and they know how important it is, right?
And that hasn't stopped either in this whole period.
The whole vinyl resurgence was a big manifestation of that, right? But even those musicians listening to this show with their musician's hat on, okay, trust me, there are no solutions under that hat, in my opinion. Take that hat off and put your consumer hat on, because if consumer habits change, then this situation will change. Band habits, as limited as they are not going to fix this situation. As Mark said, the market demands free music and it demands compliance with those current norms. Nothing and nobody can really survive against that market pressure long term, no matter how loud they shout it. Maybe some few bands like Godspeed You, Black Emperor have just the right combination of ingredients, just the right base to ride it out for a while, or maybe even the lifetime of their band. But they are such a statistical anomaly as to be virtually meaningless in this conversation when it comes to looking for solutions and progress. Just as, large-scale and effective boycotts of products are incredibly rare because they're a pain in the ass and they demand personal sacrifice, I have as much faith in simple human nature as I do in the likelihood of this situation being resolved by the actions of the musical community, which is to say very little. People, consumers, that's the behaviours that have to change. And so if you're listening to this and you're thinking, what can I do to fix it? Don't worry about what your band can do. Worry about what your habits as a consumer can do.
Yeah, I mean, as tech companies, they ultimately only respond to market demand. Clearly, they've created this marketplace and they are also creating the demand, but the consumers now demand it, so they must continue to respond to it. And the market demands access to music at relatively low cost, or in some cases free with ads. If it were possible to arrange a mass boycott, and we're talking hundreds of millions of people, then it may work, but I really don't see any way of getting out of this quagmire. But what we can do, and what we can control, is the ability to support artists that we love directly. So do that, right? I think if you do that, you can sleep soundly at night knowing that you're actually helping because their sanity, their bank balances, in some cases, their livelihoods actually depend on that money from Bandcamp or from seeing them at a show.
Absolutely. So if you've listened to this and you were at all moved by it, think of a band you love and just go and buy one of their albums or one of their shirts today. And of course, if you were moved by it, support your friendly local independent podcast content creator.
Patreon.com/unsungpod. That's where you want to go for that. But yes, if you have enjoyed this episode, please like, share and subscribe. Leave your comments below as well or on social media to let us know what you think of this, because we went deep in this, and I think that I don't know if we necessarily have we definitely don't have all the answers, but we're keen to know if you have some answers, and we're sorry it's a downer ending, but hey, life is sometimes quite sad. Next week or in 2 weeks we're going to be back with something else, but until then,
Vive la Revolution.
Yeah, all that shit. Take it easy, folks. Be well.
Bye.
Bye.
No one knows your business better than you. So who better to create your website than, well, you? Wix's website builder puts it all in your hands. Create a beautiful website just by talking with AI or choosing from thousands of templates. Customize every detail with simple drag and drop tools and get everything you need to start running business your way. Build more, think bigger, and do it all yourself on Wix. Go to Wix.com.